You focused a lot on 1979,
Yeah.
and
Well,
you talked.
1979, yeah, 1979 is a crazy year because it's like disco is burning, so it's alive, but yet everyone's trying to kill it and say it's dead. Um, Actually, what happens in 1979 is at the beginning of the year, something like 14 of the top 20 records are disco, and by the end of the year, like three of them are. And it's just this fast burn, and it's literally like everybody who had a career it was just done with. Like they were not getting the calls from the record companies anymore. Um, Studio had faded out. And again, this punk new wave thing was a big part of it because that was kind of the kibosh. Now, the one thing as much as I'd gotten into that whole underground and very heavily of this punk new wave thing, punk into new wave, um, I hated the disco sucks part of it because it was disco. It was disco. It's just I didn't really get it. It was like you're dancing to music and you're just wearing different clothes.
Yeah,
You
that
know?
was
Like you said, music is music. Right.
Right.
you've and racially motivated, don't you think?
Yeah. So there's this thing where um, it, I, I don't even like. There's a few people who make this point in the book that it is, there's parts of it that are racially motivated, but there's also parts of it that are like, it's like kind of against this kind of like Saturday Night Fever kind of people, which is not racial,
Yeah.
right? So it's a little bit of both. But was it racial? Yes, yes. There was like was it homophobic? Yeah, yeah, it was. And I just I just come from a tolerant point of view. It was like in New York, it was never we never even discussed like what race you were. Everybody just kind of got on. So the idea that like a music would separate people was kind of foreign and not cool. It wasn't cool. I mean, it just the idea that like you were separating music because of race. I just didn't really get it. I mean, I remember at the time, I listened to a lot of black music, and there'd be these groups like the Isley Brothers, and Ernest Isley was like Jimi Hendrix. I don't know if you ever heard a song called "Who's That Lady,"
Yeah.
but he's burning on that song,
Mm-hmm.
and never did a guitar magazine write about it.
Yeah. I agree.
So and a lot of these guys from these groups, I mean, a lot of these disco groups, you would watch them, Daz band, Daz disco jazz, that kind of stuff. You watch their performances, they're incredible.
Yeah.
They're incredible groups. So um and then there's the thing, which is really the whole basis of this book, is um well, musicians are musicians, right? You just hear a note and you play your version. You hear something and you play your version of it, and that's what happened with uh, Rolling Stones' "Miss You" and "Do You Think I'm Sexy" and "I Was Made for Loving You" by Kiss, and uh, you know, and of course Blondie, which is working with Giorgio Moroder, who produced Donna Summer, and but the difference was um, disco was often weakest musically in that it was either session musicians or these kind of like light disco, these light jazz groups who were kind of told like, well, if you want a record contract, you'll play disco. So there was that, but then you had the rock bands who were going to, you think about your iconic Mick Jagger and Bianca and Andy Warhol at Studio 54, or you think of, Gene Simmons and Diana Ross at Studio 54,
Yeah.
and they were digging the sounds, right? So musicians, so what you had was, finally you had real musicians playing disco. And it's not like these became disco acts. It's not like the Rolling Stones became a disco group. Or it's not, or it's not like this, Kiss is about to break up, so they're doing a lot of interviews. It's not like they're still paying for I Was Made for Loving You. They still have to explain that away.
They still
Yeah.
play it on their. It's still in their shows.
Right.
Oh,
And you know what? It's a great
Huge
song.
hit.
So I spoke to a lot of the guys who worked on that. So, so all these guys are like really good musicians. I mean, Carmine Appice's the drummer on Do You Think I'm Sexy? I mean, he played with Ozzy Osbourne. He played with Vanilla Fudge before that. I mean, Anton Fig is the drummer on I Was Made for Loving You. And all the engineers and producers, they worked on everything. Like a couple of the producers with the Kiss guys talk about how they would go to Studio 54 and then go back and mix, some hard rock song.
Yeah.
So they weren't really, they were being musician. What a musician does is they take, or at least a good musician, here's an idea and puts their own flip on it. And that's what these bands were doing. So it's really kind of fascinating. So what you got was rock tones in dance music. And that's something that still exists to this day. Like if you're going to talk about what's the legacy of this music, it's that's what it is. I mean,
yeah.
The bands that came from Manchester, England, EMD today, they have rock tones. They're basically playing, they're mixing the two, and that's beautiful. That's the blend.
Yeah, just go to Coachella and you hear that.
Right. No, that's the natural progression.
Yeah.
That's